Purchasing a home is a really big life goal for some people and a really admirable trait if you want to gain long-term wealth. But just because you're under contract on a home doesn't mean you have to go through with the contract and actually purchase the home. There are a lot of areas in the contract that you can back out if the house ends up not being a good fit for you. I'm Katie, the Real Estate Gal in Denver, Colorado. I'm going to be telling a story of one of my buyers and why we decided not to purchase a home. A little bit of backstory on the buyer. They've been looking for about 1.5 years. Every so often, they just really want to find the perfect home. So they were chatting with one of their neighbors who does fix and flips, and this neighbor had a house that was coming on the market very soon. So what they did was my buyer and his neighbor went and saw the house together. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to join, but we'll get into that in a little bit. So they showed the home, and the buyer decided that he did want to purchase this home and submit a contract. So he called me up and said, hey, Katie, I want to submit an offer. We discussed on the terms that they wanted to offer and the price point, and we ended up writing the offer. Now, one of the first red flags was that the sellers said, if you want to use us to represent you, to do dual agency, the house will be $550,000. If you want to use Katie, which is me, it's going to be $565,000. So essentially, the buyer would be paying for my commission. That's a little bit shady because across the nation, sellers are notorious for paying for the buyer's agent commission and the listing agent's commission. Now, I've been working with this buyer for quite some time. Of course, I want to continue to work with them. So we were able to negotiate with the listing agent and seller and bring the price point down $5,000. And what I was going to do is credit my buyer a couple $1,000 so we could kind of even it out. Luckily, both parties agreed. And when they saw the house was Tuesday, we submitted the contract Wednesday night and went under contract Thursday morning. Everybody's happy. We are under contract. Both sides have signed and agreed upon terms. So a little bit of a backstory on this house is that it was purchased in March of 2022 for $350,000. I did go back to that MLS input and I saw that the house was inhabitable and it actually had a hole in the back of the house, and the city deemed it that no one could live there. So what the buyer did for the house back in March 2022 is they purchased the home and then they listed it on the market July 2022, completely renovated. So new flooring, new walls, new paint, all of the appliances were new furnace. They did a sewer scope and fixed that, and then they listed it in July 2022, which is when my buyer went and saw it. So my buyer had 3 days to submit the earnest money, which they did to the title company. And then the next step would be to set up the inspection. So I sent several inspectors that I know and trust to my buyer that they could choose whichever inspector was the best fit. And now it's inspection day. So inspection day is the first day that I got to see the house. When you walk in, the flooring was pretty uneven. Though it was new, they didn't level it off before they put the new flooring on. So if you took a handful of marbles and just set them on the ground, they would roll everywhere in every single room. It was a 2-bed, 2-bath house with a longer kind of narrow living room as well as a kitchen. No matter what room you were in, there was never going to be a flat surface that you're walking on. So that was red flag number 3. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's a structural problem or that the house is unsafe, but you could definitely tell that a corner may have been cut. So the 4th red flag was a bowing wall down in the basement. That also doesn't mean that there's a structural problem, but that is why you hire an inspector so they can help guide you in the right direction on if you should have a structural engineer come out and look at this foundation, make recommendation. I personally have experience with a crack in the foundation and a bowing wall in the basement. So when I immediately see those, I think, let's go back to the buyer's goals and see if that aligns with what they originally told me of why they're buying a house and what their objective is. The 5th red flag is an appraisal waiver. So typically when a buyer can submit 20% as a down payment, input the address into the system, know that the buyer is putting 20% down, and they might get an appraisal waiver, so appraisal doesn't even need to happen. However, when this house was purchased in March 2022, they purchased it for $350,000, and now they're selling to my client for $560,000. That is too big of a jump and too short of a time frame to get an appraisal waiver, so we would have to have an appraisal and make sure that the value is on point. Now on inspection day, the inspector is going through the house, and one thing that I really admire about this inspector is he said, hey, can you come here to either myself or the buyer? I want to show you this thing. It's actually a pretty easy fix. You just take off the handle of the shower and you turn this little plastic white piece just a little bit, and then you're going to be getting hot water. That's super helpful instead of just saying something along the lines, this item doesn't work, have a handyman look at it. So he's actually giving tips and tricks along the way. So one of the things he noticed is that there's a foundational crack in the crawl space, not something you would typically see if you were just walking through the house. So he had his partner crawl through the crawl space and look at the cracks in the foundation. Now, mind you, there was also that bowing that we saw a little bit earlier as well. So he made a recommendation of something. It might be as easy as a fix as epoxy, but it could be something a little bit bigger. And just because of the layout of the basement, it could be extremely costly. So that was another little red flag that popped up on inspection. Second one was the wiring for the garbage disposal and the dishwasher. They couldn't run at the same time or else they would trip one of the breakers. A fourth one is when they went into the attic, they said that the wiring was just haywire, if you will, and it just wasn't secured properly. A fourth one was the radon. So they had been in the house for about an hour and a half and the radon was 7.3 already. Typically 4.0 picoliters or under, you are safe. You don't need a radon mitigation system. We were already at 7.3. So it does take about 24 to 48 hours to test the radon levels. They put it in the lowest part of the house and they just test for the radon emissions and the radon gases. Now, he said based off the layout of the basement, it's not going to be your typical radon mitigation system, which can range $1,000 to $1,200. It would need to be a hybrid radon mitigation system, which I didn't know existed, which can cost between $3,000 to $4,000. So all of these tiny little red flags are popping up, and when you put them all together, it can be really, really costly. Now what we did is we went back to the buyer's goals when I first met with them, which goals can change, but foundation repair and all these different things that are adding up was not on their list of fixes that they wanted to do, especially when the house was just flipped. It was just renovated. Everything should be spick and span, brand new, but that's exactly why you hire an inspector. Just because something looks beautiful and trendy and shiny doesn't mean that there's not things behind the scenes that are going on. So we had 4 days to think about what we wanted to do. Did we want to terminate the contract or did we want to move forward and just ask for repairs? We could also ask for a credit so that we could do the repairs ourselves. And when I say we, I mean the buyer. Now, as long as we submit our termination before the deadline, the buyer will get their earnest money back. However, they will not get the cost of the inspection back. For this inspection, it was probably about $800. But at the end of the day, do you want to buy a $500,000 house that's a little bit or a lot of it broken? We weren't 100% sure. Or do you want to eat that $800 and find something else that aligns with your goals? It's definitely not an easy decision, but we decided to back out to potentially have an issue where you have to fix a basement. From my own personal experience, it can range between $30,000 to $60,000 or even more depending on square footage. If you have any specific questions on this story, or if you're going through something that you need a little bit of guidance on, I would be more than happy to help. I'm located in Denver, Colorado, but even if you're in other states, I would love to help you. And this is a perfect example of why you hire a real estate agent, so you can lean on their expertise to help guide you through the process and make the best decision for your huge purchase. Katie, the real estate gal in Denver, Colorado, please reach out to me if you need help with buying, selling, or anything in between. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button or subscribe because I do release videos every single week. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next week.